Recording in progress.
You want to start? Good evening.
Good evening.
It is a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute to this very scholarly and well-researched lecture on exploring Khambat and early Parsi settlement. It is a great pleasure for us to renew our acquaintance with Dr. Meher Mistry, who has been working with the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute for a long time now. And in fact, some of you may recollect that Meher was a prominent figure in the production of the 4-volume study of the Seth family. This is one of her major publications. And the work of the research of this particular doctorate project led her as far as the archives in Paris, which were accessed for the first time. And with a guide like Dr. Mridula Ramana, the product is an excellent one. Normally, when we talk of Parsis and Parsi settlements, we focus on Sanjan and these areas. Khambat is relatively unknown, lesser known, I would say, and therefore work on this particular topic being presented as a result of extensive research becomes very important for us. I welcome particularly the history teachers and look forward to a greater association with them, with the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute, and a few new guests who have just joined us. I welcome them and look forward to their being with us for many of our future programs. May I now request Dr. Mistry to make her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Nawaz Modi, for your very generous introduction. It has always been a pleasure to be associated with the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute. My association with the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute, in fact, dates to 2000, when my late guide, Dr. Mani Kamerkar, had brought out her book on the Parsi settlements. And that is how I started my work on the Parsi settlements under her guidance. And later on, I went on to do a PhD under her first, and then, of course, under Dr. Mridula Ramana from the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. I am also very thankful to Dr. Fleur D'Souza for guiding me forever when I was her college student at Xavier's. And Dr. Nawaz Modi mentioned that I went to Paris to access some Gujarati records while doing my research, and I'm very thankful to her for having enabled me to receive a travel grant from the Tata Trust, which helped me in my journey of research. With this, I think I'll now start my talk. I thank the K.R. Kama Oriental once again for giving me an opportunity to deliver this talk. Can you please share the screen, Snehal? Yes. Thank you. So today's talk is on Khambat. Khambat, Cambay is not only an early Parsi settlement, it is also a prominent port of the medieval period. And today I want to focus on its history as a Parsi settlement, right from the time of the arrival to its decline. I would say decline because the settlement exists only for name. There is only one family presently left at this settlement. So let me begin with my talk. The Parsis, as all of you know, are an ethno-religious minority who migrated to the west coast of India sometime after the end of the Sasanian Empire in Iran in 641 AD. And Khambat or Cambay, which is situated at the head of the Gulf of the same name and lies to the north of the estuary of the river Mahi, emerged as a location where the Parsis formed one of their first settlements. Please change the slides. So this is the location. Khambat is quite close, around 89 kilometers from Ahmedabad. It is quite close to Jambusar and Baroda also. And it is located near river Mahi. It is a port of great eminence in the medieval period. Next, please. Next. So let us now talk about the Parsi arrival at Khambat. I put a question mark here because we do not know exactly when the Parsis arrived at Khambat. Of course, we have the Kisse Sanjan, which was a quasi-historical poem giving an account of the early history of the Parsis, but it was written down very late in around 1599. And therefore, we do not have a proper historical account of the coming of the Parsis, and the dates which are mentioned in the Kisse Sanjan are all round dates. So we can only make some inferences as to exactly when they came to Sanjan or when they came to Khambat. It is possible that the Parsis came towards Khambat in around 1085 AD. According to the Kisse, they came to Khambat around 300 years after their arrival. Now, it is also possible that they may have made an independent landing because there are certain accounts by European people like the English chaplain Henry Lord and the Dutch factor W. Jelinson Jong. They mention that there may have been several groups migrating from Iran and settling down on the western coast of India. The Kisse Sanjan is the story of one such group which landed at Sanjan, but there is a theory, and many are exploring these theories, that there could have been concurrent migrations. Khambat had developed as an important port from the 8th century onwards. Next, please. Frequent raids of Arab pirates and siltation at Bharuch had, next please, had led a part of its trade being diverted towards Khambat. Bharuch was a very flourishing port. Bari Gaza was a preeminent port mentioned in the Periplus, and till the 8th century, it was the main port on the western coast. Under the Solankis, Khambat received a lot of patronage, and we can understand its prosperity and its cosmopolitan economy from the accounts of several Arab travelers. For example, Masudi, he talks about Khambat being a prosperous settlement. He talks about the presence of fire worshippers in India, and it is very much possible that he may have noticed them at Khambat if they had arrived there by this time. There is a possibility that they may have arrived because the Zoroastrians had links, trade links with India for a very long time. And it is a theory which is explored that it was their economic connections which made them come towards India when they were facing religious persecution and there were not enough economic opportunities in Iran. So it is very much possible, as suggested by Andre Vink and others, that economic factors played a very important role in the migration of the Parsis towards India. And Khambat is one of the prosperous maritime towns of this period. If we look at the areas where the Parsis settled down, all of them are hugging the sea coast. All of them are ports of very great importance. Even Sanjan, as is worked upon through the Sanjan excavations, we have realized that Sanjan was also a port of eminent importance around the time when the Parsis landed. So Khambat, Bharuch, Sanjan, later Surat, all these were places associated with maritime connections. Now, let us try to figure out what we can piece together of the early history of the Parsis in Khambat. There is very scanty evidence up till 1300 about the Parsis in Khambat. There is, next slide, please. There is a reference about a very doubtful reference about some Parsi Muslim riots at Khambat having occurred in around 1094 or 1143 AD. Now, Muhammad Ufi in his Jawami ul Hikayat mentions that the Muslims were attacked in the 11th century during the time of Siddharaj Jai Singh. Siddharaj Jai Singh was a famous Solanki ruler. He was known for his very tolerant attitude, and he was also responsible for the development of Khambat. Now, Ufi mentions that an attack took place on the Muslim population of Khambat due to a trade dispute between the Muslims and the Tarsas during the reign of Siddharaj, and Ufi notes that the Tarsas had instigated the infidels who attacked a mosque and killed some Muslims. And when this complaint finally reached Siddharaj Jai Singh, he made inquiries, and he then punished the representatives of the infidels and the Tarsas. Now, the problem is that Henry Eliot and Dawson, in their translations of Muhammad Ufi, uses the word fire worshippers for Tarsas. So this theory that there was a riot between the Parsis and the Muslims is being discussed a lot. Now, S.H. Hodiwala, in his writings, S.H. Hodiwala was a historian who had delivered a lot of talks before the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute on Cambay. S.H. Hodiwala and J.J. Modi are some of the scholars who have worked on these early Parsi settlements in the past. So S.H. Hodiwala had studied the word Tarsa, and he felt that it was often employed even for Christians and Buddhists, and maybe did not really mean fire worshippers over here. Hodiwala believed in the landing date of the Parsis at Sanjan of around 936 AD. Okay, he believed that the Parsis landed at landed in 936 AD because of a certain inscription where there is a date given which is interpreted as around 936 AD. Now, there is possible that there were many migrations, and it is very much possible, and it looks that the fire worshippers were already in India definitely before 936 AD, because Masudi talks about them, and many other Arab travelers have also already noticed them in India. So I do not accept a landing date of of 936 AD, and I believe that the landing must have taken much earlier, maybe around 785 or even a little earlier. Now, Hodiwala suggests that the word Tarsa in the text was used not for the Parsis but for the Jains, and he had tried to examine the internal evidence, and he had come to that conclusion. But I feel that we cannot completely eliminate this possibility of the Parsis having been engaged in a riot against the Muslims. They were not directly involved, but they had instigated the infidels or the kafirs, as is mentioned in the medieval texts. So the infidels could have been the Jains, who were very much prominent around this time, and they may have been instigated to attack the Muslims. The Parsis could have been a part of the Khambat population, could have been involved in a trade dispute, and we cannot completely eliminate the probability of them having been involved, although we do not really have any firm evidence about it. Now, we do not know for sure whether they were part of this Parsi Muslim riots, but we can be sure that they were definitely involved in trade from a very early date. That we can positively confirm from certain colophons. Next slide, please. So they were involved in trade at Khambat from an early date, and we can see that in a certain manuscript were part of Zoroastrian scriptures copied in India in the 14th century. There are these endnotes or colophons where the genealogy of the scribe, of the person who commissioned the scribe, etc. is given. And we come to know that there was this Meherwan Kekhashru, ya Mihrapan Kekhashru, an Iranian Pehlivisan, He was specially invited from Iran. He was given an honorarium to transcribe manuscripts by a leading Parsi named Chahil Sangha. Now, Haudiwala feels, and the internal evidence in the colophon somewhere indicates that Chahil Sangha must have been an important trader. The genealogy of 6 generations of Chahil Sangha is given in the colophon also offers some kind of indication that they were vyavahari or involved in trade. So this manuscripts written in 1320 to 1351 confirm that the Parsis are there in Khambhat. They are already established in trade. They are able to have connections with Iran, and there is communication happening from Khambhat with Iran. So this is a definite confirmation of their being active in trade, and some of the death dates given in the genealogy shows that 2-3 members of this family died on Roj Farvardin Ma Adar. Now, this day is normally kept for prayers for those whose death date is not known. And Hodiwala suggested that either they were drowned or killed in some long journey to a distant place, most likely undertaken for trade. So we have some evidence of their being in trade right from 1323 onwards. And we also see that there is a lot of contact with Iran. Next slide, please. Khambhat is, next slide, please. Khambhat is one of the Panthaks. It is one of the prominent Parsi settlements. And when the various Parsi settlements were divided into 5 ecclesiastical spheres, around 200 years after they moved from Sanjan to various areas. So you had Khambhat, you had Khambhat, you had Navsari, you had, what happened to the slides? We are on the 9th slide. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay. So Khambhat was one of the important panthaks, or one of the ecclesiastical sphere. It was an important area to be qualified as a separate panthak. So you had the Godawara panthak, you had the Sanjan panthak, you had Navsari, Bharuch. So these were the panthaks. Now Khambhat not only had contact with Iran up till 1351 AD, but later on also, when the Indians started trying to once again renew their contact with Iranian Zoroastrians, and what led to what is called the securing of the Riwayat literature. At that time also, Khambhat is playing a very important role. From around 1351 to 1478, we see that there is a gap in communication among the Zoroastrians of India and Zoroastrians of Iran. Now this contact is renewed when there are emissaries sent from Bharuch, from Khambhat to Iran after 1478 AD, and they bring what is called the Riwayat literature. Many scholars have tried to show that Parsi scholarship was at a low ebb around this time, and therefore such inquiries were initiated. Just give me a second, please. So many scholars feel that there was a kind of ebb of religious scholarship, which made the seeking of these riwayats from Iran and to secure more manuscripts and religious knowledge from Iran. But if we examine the riwayat literature minutely, we realize that there is more of a sense of curiosity as to what happened. Next slide, please. Snehal, the next slide. Okay, so just pause. Okay, so we have the Riwayat literature mentioning Khambhat very prominently. And we see that there is a lot of curiosity among the people in Bharuch, in Khambat, in Navsari, and they want to know how the religious ceremonies are being performed in Iran, and probably they wanted to fulfill if there are any lacunas happening in the way things were being carried out in India because of the distance and because of lack of communication over the years. Now, the Riwayat literature mentions a lot of interesting things. For example, the Riwayat talks about the construction of a stone dakhma built at Khambat. Previously, the dakhmas were built of bricks. You can see in these two figures, the two figures down are from Bharuch. These are the earliest dakhmas known in India, besides, of course, the Sanjan dakhma, which is just a mound which was excavated. But this is the lower two dakhmas. They are from Bharuch. One was built in 1309 and one predates that dakhma. Both of them were made of brick. But in Iran, it was the Iranians suggested that the dakhmas should be built of stone so that there would be no contamination of the earth. So after that, we see after 1535 onwards, we see more of stone dakhmas being constructed all over India, and that was because of the kind of instruction which they received from the Iranians. So we see that in 1535 there was a stone dakhma made at Khambat. The fact that there is a stone dakhma constructed shows that there must be a huge population around this time. And the Riwayats also mention that the people in Khambat were using wooden biers to carry the dead, and they objected to this practice and said that it would lead to pollution through the dead body, and iron biers should be used. So there were lots of such minute details over which queries were being sent and answers were being sought. So contrary to what has been assumed, religious scholarship and interest in religious affairs was not low, but in fact it was quite high, and especially in places like Khambat and other Zoroastrian settlements of India. We see that priests are sending emissaries. Some of these are traders who are regularly going towards Iran. In fact, one of the first riwayat was brought by Nariman Hoshang of Bharuch, who had who went to Iran, learned the language, had a trade in dates, and then brought the first riwayat. But from Khambat, there were already some people active in trade, and they are moving towards Iran to with questions from the religious leaders of India, seeking clarifications, and this is a very interesting phase in the history of the Parsis, this phase of communication between Iran and India. Okay, next slide, please. This is an old dakhma ruin at Khambat. This may have been the brick dakhma which was there prior to the stone dakhma, or another dakhma which existed before the last dakhma constructed in 1830s. So these okay, please move on to the next slide. This shows that Khambat was a well settled, was a Parsi settlement with a good number of citizens. And we also know that there were many traders through the Riwayat literature, because Hirji Asa, who had constructed that stone dakhma, he had also built 2 wells and a fire temple in the Parsiwad area. The ruins are still existing, and you can see them in this picture. Kama Asa was one of the persons who went to secure these riwayats, and he had sent his brother to secure some of these riwayats. Some of these inquiries he had initiated on his own. Till 1637, we see that Khambat is sending emissaries and is mentioned in riwayats. Next slide, please. Next. These are all ruins from the Parsi Agyari of Khambat. Okay. Now let us talk about an interesting legend called the Kumarika Kshetra legend. It is mentioned by Captain Robertson, and it is based on oral testimony that he had gathered. The legend goes that there was an attack on the Parsi settlement by a Kalyan Rai. Now, this Kumarika Kshetra episode was first confused to have taken place during the time of Mulraj Solanki in around 940 to 997 AD, because he had founded this Kumarika Kshetra settlement and he had peopled it with the Nagara Brahmins. But Hodiwala in his research has tried to show that the Kumarika Kshetra legend may have taken place during the time of the Mughals. And there was a Mutsadi by the name of Kalyan Rai. He played an important role at Khambat. So he, through his work, has concluded that this incident must have taken place much later, around 1583, 1584. So the story goes, the legend goes that the Parsis were very successful as traders at Khambat. They had outnumbered the original inhabitants. They had started attacking the Hindus and looting their property. So the Hindus panicked and began to flee, and the Parsis became the sole possessors of Cambay. Now, one of these Hindus called Kalyan Rai from the Dasalar Vanya caste had taken refuge in Surat and had become very wealthy and influential. And he, with the help of Rajputs and police, attacked the Parsis in the night and set fire to their houses. And the Parsis who survived fled, and according to the legend, from then on, not a Parsi was to be seen in Kumarika Kshetra. Now, this legend was recorded by Robert's son. The legend says that Kalyan Rai then built a new town on its ruins. Now, this Kalyan Rai, according to Hodiwala, was the Mutsadi of Cambay. Now, there may be a lot of dramatization of the events, but the fact that there is a legend like this, we cannot verify exactly whether the Parsis were ever able to establish their control at Cambay in this manner, and they made the Hindus flee from Cambay. That is very unlikely to have happened in history, but it is an indicator that there is an association of the Parsis with trade and their being dominant in trade at Khambat. So this legend indicates Parsi prominence in trade. There was an attack on Khambat by Sayyid Daulat in 1583-84, and it is possible that the Parsi population in Khambat may have suffered a lot during this attack, and there may have been a decline of the Parsi settlement after this period. S.H. Hodiwala had tried to show that after 1601, the Parsis of Bharuch are not mentioned much in the Rivayats. In fact, he felt that they were not mentioned at all, although he himself had worked on a Rivayat of 1681, which does mention Parsis of Khambat. But it is true that in this period from 1600 to 1681, there is very little mention of the Parsis. 2-3 Rivayats are secured by the Parsis during this period. For example, Behadin Kaus Mayyar was active in securing a Rivayat, the Rivayat of 1601. So definitely the settlement was in existence after 1583-84. And Behadin Kaus Mayyar had been engaged in trade, overseas trade. He had made occasional trips to Persia. He had, next slide please, he had met Dastur Ardeshar Kermani at, previous slide please. He had met Dastur Ardeshar Kermani at Multan, and he had brought a letter addressed to Dastur Kamdin Padam of Bharuch in 1597. And he had also posed several questions to the priests in Iran on his own. So he was very much interested in religious matters. Many names from Khambat are mentioned in this 1601 Rivayat, and this shows a continued presence of the Parsis. They did not disappear from Khambat. They are mentioned in the Rivayat of 1681, but there was a decline in their numbers. The decline probably had to do with the fact that Khambat was a port which was now being outrivaled by Surat. Surat was developing under the patronage of the Mughals, and many foreign merchants were gradually leaving Khambat for Surat. So probably the decline in numbers of Parsis at Khambat was more to do with the decline of the trade which was going on from Khambat. It is interesting to observe that the Parsis arrived at Khambat when it was the most important port of Gujarat, and it showed a near exodus around the time Surat developed as the premier port of the Mughal Empire, and all trade was being diverted to Surat. Khambat does not vanish from the scene of trade. Khambat now becomes a part of the vast hinterland of Surat, and it contributed much to the prosperity of Surat. The Parsis now are later in the later centuries, we see that they again play an important role as brokers and agents. Next slide, please. They are mentioned by Garcia da Horta in 1534 also as merchants. So this shows that there has been this association of the Cambay Parsis and trade. Next slide, please. Okay. So we already discussed this, that there was a theory proposed by Hodiwala that there was a near exodus of Parsis, but that did not really happen. We see them being mentioned, and they are there in not only in the Riwayat literature, but their presence is noted in the subsequent centuries also. Next slide, please. So there was no en masse migration of the Parsis from Khambat. The migration was towards Surat and towards Bharuch. And later on, we see that the Parsis, though reduced in numbers, are playing a very important role as brokers and agents to the Dutch and English at Khambat. Okay, next slide. So the Mughals had encouraged the Dutch and the English to set up factories at Khambat. They had hoped that with the naval might of the Dutch and the English, they would be able to challenge the Portuguese. The Portuguese had even looted Khambat once and had led to a lot of destruction of Cambay. Now, in return for the privileges which were granted to the English and the Dutch, they were made to protect the Indian vessels from the Portuguese, who were demanding a cartas and were trying to monopolize the Indian Ocean trade. The coming of the English and the Dutch created opportunities for commodity brokerage and supply agencies for the Parsis at Khambat. The coming of these factories also provided opportunities for them to become brokers. Now, we do not have evidence of them being brokers under the Portuguese, but from the 18th century onwards, in the Surat factory records, we have a mention about Behramji Kawasji as a broker to the British, was procuring textiles for almost 100 years. Behramji's father, Kawasji, is mentioned as a broker at Khambat in 1719-20 AD. Behramji was also an agent of Mancheji Kharshedji Seth, who was a prominent merchant of Surat. Now, from 1724 to 25, we see that Khambat is subjected to repeated invasion of the Marathas. They were desirous of obtaining control, and the Marathas had benefited from the fact that there was a decline of central authority after the death of Aurangzeb. Khambat comes under the control of Momin Khan, the Mutsadi of Khambat, in 1738. And with that, we have this dynasty of the Nawabs of Khambat. Somebody's video and audio is on. Can you please mute it? Okay. So with Nawab Khan, the Khambat Nawab dynasty, with Momin Khan, the dynasty of the Khambat Nawabs begins. Behramji Kawasji was used by the English from a very early date to deal both with the Marathas and the Nawab. And he had a very good relationship with the English resident of Khambat called Daniel Innes. Daniel Innes was even having a private trade with the help and advice of Behramji. This was a very common phenomenon for the English residents to have a certain amount of private trade. And this had later led to a dispute which Innes was forced to settle because the company could not remove Behramji, and Behramji was kept, although there had been connections with Innes and his private trade. Now, in January 1736, later on, after Innes is replaced, you have Hugh Bidwell becoming the agent. And for some time, there is another broker called Mehta Narayan. But Bidwell was cheated by this broker called Mehta Narayan. So John Munro replaced Bidwell, and again in 1736, we see Adalji Kawasji, the son of Bairamji Kawasji, emerging as the broker to the English factory. So there is a lot of information on Adalji Kawasji and Bairamji Kawasji in the English factory records. Now, by this time, the Nawab of Khambat had started to rely a lot on the support of the English, and he had agreed to what is called a system of protection. Under the system of protection, the brokers and the merchants who were under English protection, they would get special privileges, trading concessions, etc. So because of that, we see Adalji Kawasji is playing a very important role in the trade of Khambat. The English are able to have control over the trade. Adalji Kawasji is working as vakil, and there is a lot of competition around this time to become the vakil or to secure contracts for supplying to the English. Bairamji and Adalji took maximum advantage of their association with the English. Sometimes they would even pass the goods of Indian merchants without paying any duty to the Nawab. And they would claim that these are English goods, but they would be goods of Indian merchants. And they were trying to just use the system of protection to their advantage. The Nawab very well understood what was happening. He was suffering from a loss of revenue, and he, of course, resented this. Now, the English, after 1759, become very assertive at Khambat. They had taken over Surat Castle in 1759, and Khambat sees this three-party struggle. On one side is the Nawab, and then you have the Marathas and the English. They are all trying to take control of the trade of Khambat and capture Khambat. The English are successful, and the Nawab becomes a nominal ruler. The Nawab remains in power in the 19th century. He comes under the control of the British. Now let us try and understand what happens with Adalji Kawasji's descendants. Next slide, please. So Adalji Kawasji's descendants, they also played an important role in the trade politics at Khambat. After Adalji's death in 1772, his sons, Jamshedji, Ratanji, Kuwarji, and Dadabhai, they were all appointed in the position of broker to the English at Khambat, and they were given all these allowances which their father had also enjoyed. Jamshedji and his brother Ratanji, they had rendered a lot of help to Peshwa Raghoba. You must all be aware that Peshwa Raghoba had taken refuge at Cambay. He had sought the help of the British. He had signed the Treaty of Surat, and Charles Mellet had sent him to Khambat. Charles Mellet was the head of the English factory at Khambat. He had provided refuge to Raghoba. Raghoba had been defeated by the Barabhai Mandal. Haribalal Fadke had defeated him, and he had come and settled down at Khambat. Was seeking the protection of the English. This was in 1774 AD. Now Ratanji was appointed in the services of Raghoba, and we see that a lot of friendly letters from Raghoba to Jamshedji, which were written down during their association, were later on shown by his son, by Jamshedji's son Kharshedji, to secure the village of Ralej as an inam from the Marathas in 1803 AD. The Dakhma which you see here is on this Ralej site. So the Adalji Kawasji family is playing an important role in the politics of trade which is happening in Khambat. There are some other Parsis also who are active in the trade politics happening in Khambat. The English factory records mention a certain Palanji Hormusji. This Parsi was involved in an intrigue along with some other inhabitants of Khambat to make Govindrao Gayakwad the master of Khambat. But his plans did not succeed. Okay, the English came to know about it, and his plans were not successful. So contrary to popular perception, we see that the Parsis were not always in close alliance with the English. Sometimes they were even engaged in plots against the English, and they were with the Marathas. This was seen even in the case of Manchedji Kharshedji Seth of Surat. So the alliances depended on the individual and the factors. The Parsis played a very prominent role during the politics of this transition period when the power of the Marathas is being replaced by the English in Western India. This is seen further in the case of Kharshedji Modi. Kharshedji Modi was the son of Jamshedji Edalji, and he was the grandson of Edalji Kawasji Modi. And he too was employed in the British factory. When Charles Mellet became the resident of Pune in 1785 AD, he called Kharshedji to Pune and gave him a post in the residency over there. He later on played an important role as the native agent to the next resident, Colonel Close at Pune. So Kharshedji is becoming the native agent for the British, and he is responsible for the smooth relations between Peshwa Bajirao II and the English resident. The Peshwa was also happy with his services, and he had even given him the position of Sar Subedar of the Karnataka. This post, however, he had to later give up because Mount Stuart Elphinstone, when he became the resident, he objected to it, and he said that this is incompatible with his position as native agent of the English. So he had to choose between the Maratha position of Sar Subedar or the position of native agent. So he had to relinquish the position of Sar Subedar, and his involvement in politics is a story very interesting. His involvement leads to his removal from Pune, and there is his mysterious death when he was asked to leave Pune. One night prior to that, he died under mysterious circumstances, and probably this was all connected with the politics which was happening around this time. And there is a very nice article in the Journal of the Gujarat Research Society on Kharshedji Modi, who was a Parsi Sar Subedar of the Karnataka. Kharshedji Modi's brother Hormuzji had a son called Pestanji Modi, and Pestanji Modi was also the son-in-law of Kharshedji. He inherits all the wealth which Kharshedji had. Kharshedji died in 1815, and after Kharshedji's death, we see that Trimbakji Dengle, who was the Sar Subedar of Ahmedabad, he attacked the village of Ralej. He took over the village of Ralej from the control of the Modi family. The British government then later on had control over it. Pestanji Modi, a descendant, the son of Kharshedji's brother Hormuzji, fights a very long legal battle, and he manages to show that this village was given in perpetuity to the Modi family, and he re-establishes his control over this land in Ralej. So this was given back to him in December 1832 by the British after a very long battle. And in 1826, Pestanji constructed a Dakhma. At that time, the number of Parsis in Khambat was not much, but the family was a very prominent family. They had a lot of wealth, and they desired to construct a Dakhma to serve the 100-200 Parsis who were still there in Khambat. So Dakhma was constructed as late as 1826 at Ralej in the memory of Kharshedji Modi and Edalji Kawasji. Now, this Pestanji Modi himself was a very prominent merchant. He was part of the China trade, which was happening at that time, the sale of raw cotton and opium. So Pestanji was involved in the China trade. In 1841, he had suffered a loss in trade, and he had to wind up his business in Bombay, and he retired and went back to Khambat. There he got an agyari built. So this agyari, the ruins of which we saw, was constructed in 1844. Sadly, it is not in a very good situation. It is completely in ruins. The older agyari maybe was at the same site because we do not find any evidences of two separate agyaris in Khambat. So an agyari was constructed in 1844, and after the death of Pestanji, we see that the village of Ralej remained with his descendants, and I think it is still property with the control of the Parsi people. Besides, next slide, please. Besides the Modi family, this is one more image of this Khambat Dakhma constructed by Pestanji Modi. Next slide, please. Okay. Before I talk about the migration, let us try to understand that besides the Modi family, we have many other Parsi merchants also in Khambat, and they too were protected merchants of the English. Sometimes the Nawab would show his resent towards these merchants because they were getting all these protection and a lot of trade concessions, and they were sometimes actually looting the Nawab. So the British wanted to show that they were the masters. They were determined to show that the merchants under their protection were not under the jurisdiction of the Nawab. And often they tried to assert their authority over the authority of the Nawab. There is also a possibility that some of the Parsis may have been part of the famous Cornelian trade of Khambat, the agate trade which was happening from Khambat. The Ratanpur mines close to Bharuch have these wonderful agate stones which are polished at Khambat, and it is still a flourishing trade at Khambat. So there is possibility that some Parsis may have been part of the famous Cornelian trade, although it was majorly in the hands of the Bohras and the Armenians. They were also involved in commissariat work, and we have some references about them supplying garrison, supplying the needs of the garrison. So some of them continued to enjoy privileges even under the time of the Nawab of Khambat. To conclude, the settlement of the Parsis at Khambat provided a period of consolidation and growth. It helped in the formation of their socio-religious and economic identity before the rise of Surat and Bombay. Migration of the Parsis from Khambat to centers like Bharuch, Surat, and later Bombay was a continuous but gradual phenomenon from the beginning of the 17th century. The minuscule Parsi community which survived at Khambat played a role much beyond its proportion. The Parsis by 1775 AD numbered only 200. The 1872 census report also mentions only 107 Parsis at Khambat. They were mainly traders, distillers, and weavers. The community today is non-existent, with a single Parsi family, next slide please, inhabiting the Parsi Wada amidst the ruins of the fire temple. The Dakhma grounds at Ralej have survived, but they are in a state of neglect. I had visited Khambat in 2000, and these images, many of these images are from that field trip conducted at Khambat in 2000. So that was the state at that time, and presently the state is even worse. Next slide, please. So these are some of the ruins of the Agyari. Next. This is the last Parsi family whom I interacted with when I had gone for a field trip. And these are some images from the net about this family recently when they were interviewed by Hindustan Times, and an article was published on them. So the family still exists. It's the last family which is still holding on to Khambat. Next slide, please. This is an image of Khambat in 2020 taken during the lockdown. It's a drone image, and I just thought it would be interesting to see how beautiful Khambat looks even today. It's a blend of the modern and the ancient. Next. So the port has completely declined. A lot of siltation had made this port decline in use even in the medieval period. And that is one of the reasons why Surat became more prominent. Next slide, please. Okay, with this I conclude. Thank you very much for a patient listening, and I am open to all your queries. Thank you very much.
Good evening, madam. My name is Naushir. I am a tour guide with MTDC. I have two questions to ask you.
Okay.
One is this Ratanji that you have mentioned. I have read somewhere that he was given some land in Tarapur as well, near Boisar. So there was a general in Shivaji's army called Ratanji. So I just wanted to know whether it is the same Ratanji or it is a different Ratanji.
This Ratanji was not part of Chhatrapati Shivaji's army. He's during the time of Peshwa Raghuba. So that
Okay,
ma'am. Chronologically, it doesn't fit anyways. I don't know. There may be a Ratanji who must have been given some territory in Tarapur, but it is not this Ratanji.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And one more, I was planning to visit all the Parsi Agyaris in India. So I wanted some information. I have read about Baroda, and I never knew that something existed in Khambat. So thank you for throwing light. And if possible, I am planning to go sometime in December or sometime. So I'll try and meet this family as well. And Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. This is the only family which is still holding on to Khambat, and they have been very receptive to whoever who has interacted with them.
So if I have to find them, madam, are they in Raleigh or what is the?
No, I just took a rickshaw from the station and I went. I said Parsiwad Khambat, and I was taken by the rickshawala family to this
From-
place called Parsiwad, and I found them. It
From
was
Khambat, right?
this was in 2000. Now things have changed. I'm sure you will find somebody who can help you to contact them.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Any other queries?
Mayor, that Manchirji
ma'am.
Kharcheji Seth, is he part of the Seth family? The Seth?
He is the part of the other Seth family of Surat, not the one which we worked on for the genealogy project. He's from the family of Jarulam.
Okay.
Manchirji Kharcheji Seth was a very eminent broker at Surat, and he was with the Dutch. He was in alliance with the Dutch, not with the English. And there is a lot of work done by Gulam on Manchirji Kharcheji, and I also in my thesis have done a lot of work on the Kabise controversy, where Manchirji Kharcheji was one of the leaders of the Shahenshahi side. The other side was led, the Kadmis were led by Dhanjisha Manjisha. So there is this fascinating Kabise controversy where Manchirji Kharcheji of Surat is playing an important role. Yes. Any other questions? Thank you for your kind words.
Are there
So,
any more questions?
The Parsis.
Yes, please continue, Mayor.
Yeah, so the Parsis at Khambat are very small in number, but they are playing an important role as brokers, as agents, and there is a lot of trade politics happening around this time. So they are trying to take, they are trying to find their foothold. They are trying to continue with their trade, and they are trying to survive in this changing economic scenarios. And that is what leads to them getting involved in the trade politics of that time. That is just what I wanted to point out over here. And it is also very interesting to see that Khambat, although being a very small settlement, is playing a very important role in getting the rivayats from Iran. And there are traders who are coming from Khambat, going to Iran, and they are carrying with them queries from the priests of, the Agyari is not in operation. They are taking queries from the priests of Navsari. Now, there is a debate in Parsi history as to whether these rivayats indicate that there was some strife between the lay people and the priests, and whether the lay people were trying to secure rivayats. I'm sorry. So there is a debate in Parsi history regarding whether the rivayats were initiated to, overrule the authority of the priests in India and get a superior authority from Iran to give them rulings and decide certain religious questions. But in my thesis, I have tried to point out, and this I could see very clearly from the rivayats originating from Bharuch, Khambat, and Surat, that this was not the case. The rivayats indicate that there are certain doubts in the mind of the Parsis with regard to how certain ceremonies are to be performed, and they are just seeking more knowledge from the Zoroastrian priests of Iran, whom they believed must have been able to keep the ceremonial aspects, the ritual aspects in an intact manner. So it was the strife which happens between the laity and the priests is seen more in a later period when the calendar controversy comes about. It is not there when the Riwayat literature is initiated. And it is very fascinating to see that there is so much trade happening, although maybe it is not a very major trade happening, but there is trade happening from the smaller settlements of Bharuch and Khambat with Iran at this point of time. Any other queries? This last Parsi family of Khambat has had some old members when I visited it. Presently, I think there are only 2 members of this family living in Khambat. The elder members may not be in existence now, and one of the ladies of the family had married to a nearby Muslim family. So I think because of the existing connections with her also, the family has continued to live here. So I met them a long time ago. Their surname was Khambata, and one of the persons who was living with them was a Tawadia. So I don't have contact with them presently. Okay, there is a question which says, what is the earliest evidence of trade with Iran? The trade with Iran was there even before the coming of the Parsis to India. And I would say that this earliest evidence of Parsis trading with Iran is in the Riwayat literature. And if we say that Chahil Sangha was a trader, that there is an inference, because the word in the colophons indicates that there is an appellation attached to his name called Vyavar or Vyapa, which indicates that he was from the trading class. The way the word Vohara, Vo, is used in Gujarati before a trader's name. So Chahil Sangha probably belonged to a trading family, and the fact that he called a scribe from Iran means that there were certain trade contacts which Chahil Sangha had at that time with Iran. So yes, in the 1320s, definitely there was trade between the Parsis and Iran. That is my inference based on the material which I have examined so far. Thank you, friends, for encouraging me with all your wonderful comments.
If there is no further questions or query, I'd like to formally propose a vote of thanks. We're really grateful to Dr. Meher Mistry for this very well-researched and well-presented lecture on a topic which very few of us know anything about. And it has been a great education for all of us. I must also record our thanks to the Ramnarayan Jhunjhunwala College for making the presentation process available to us through their excellent Zoom connection, and to Professor Snehal Nair, who is behind the screen, helping Meher with the PowerPoints and making it possible for the whole lecture to run very smoothly. I thank all of you for taking time today to be with us at this very wonderful educational experience. Thank you very much, and we look forward to you joining us for our next presentation next month also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nawaz Modi, once again for offering me this opportunity to speak on this topic. And it is wonderful to be associated with the K.R. Kama Oriental Institute in this capacity. I remember the lecture which I had delivered before on Bharuch and the Kabise controversy at the K.R. Kama. And I am very happy to be once again delivering a lecture for this eminent institute, which has been doing so much for Parsi scholarship and Oriental scholarship. Thank you very much, madam. And I also would like to officially put on record thanks to our director, Dr. Usha Mukundan, madam, and our principal, sir, Dr. Himanshu Dauda, for allowing us access of the Zoom platform of the college. Thank you. With this, should we end the meeting, ma'am?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Snehal, please end the meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, one and all.